Let my people go.
The slaves are mine. Their lives are mine. All that they own is mine.
What if the most watched movie in television history was built on secrets, near-death disasters, and decisions so bizarre they sound completely made up? The Ten Commandments is not just a movie. It is a living, breathing piece of history that has kept stunning people for nearly 70 years. And today, you are about to find out exactly why this film is even more jaw-dropping behind the scenes than it is on screen. Let us count it down. Number 20. The Prop Stone tablets sold at auction for $50,000 in 2024. Here is where we start, and here is why it matters right now. In the year 2024, a set of the iconic stone tablets that Charlton Heston carried as Moses in this very film went under the hammer at a prop store auction and sold for $50,000. That is not a small amount of money for what are essentially painted wooden boards covered in fiberglass. But that price tag tells you everything you need to know about how deeply this film has buried itself into the hearts of people around the world. Most people watching the film assumed those enormous tablets were genuinely carved from stone, because Heston's movements made them look impossibly heavy. The truth is that the prop department built 6 separate sets of lightweight fiberglass tablets over wooden cores, each one speckled with paint to resemble dark red granite. Director Cecil B. DeMille had separate tablets hewn from actual Sinai granite and inscribed with ancient Canaanite script by Dr. Ralph Marcus of the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute. Those were kept for display purposes. The ones Heston actually swung around on camera were the fakes. And when a biblical archaeologist later examined the Canaanite inscriptions on the display tablets, he discovered that the characters do not actually spell any recognizable words. The entire inscription is, in his words, complete gobbledygook. A globally revered film prop, worshipped by millions, inscribed with ancient-looking nonsense, and someone still paid $50,000 for it. Number 19. Metallica wrote one of their most famous songs because of this film. If you think the Ten Commandments only influenced church groups and Sunday school teachers, think again. The 1984 heavy metal classic Creeping Death by Metallica exists entirely because of this film. Bassist Cliff Burton was watching the Ten Commandments one evening when the angel of death appeared on screen as a slow, eerie, bluish-green mist creeping silently through Egypt and killing the firstborn children as it passed over each home. Burton reportedly turned to the rest of the band and said, "Whoa, that is like creeping death." And just like that, a song was born. Here is where it gets stranger. The song contains the iconic line, "So let it be written, so let it be done," which is Yul Brynner's most famous line as Pharaoh Ramesses. That phrase has been quoted and parodied for decades. The only problem is that it appears absolutely nowhere in the Bible, in Josephus, in the Midrash, or in any historical document about ancient Egypt. DeMille's screenwriters invented it entirely. Metallica immortalized a made-up phrase from a Hollywood script, and somehow it still sounds like ancient truth every single time you hear it. Number 18. This movie accidentally created a real United States Supreme Court case. Most films leave behind memories. This one left behind constitutional law. As part of the promotional campaign for the Ten Commandments, DeMille partnered with Minnesota Judge E.J. Rugemer and the Fraternal Order of Eagles to erect approximately 150 granite monuments of the Ten Commandments across 34 states and Canada. These were not cardboard cutouts or temporary displays. These were massive, permanent granite slabs placed on the grounds of courthouses, schools, and government buildings. DeMille attended dedication ceremonies in multiple cities. Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner showed up to smile for photographs next to the monuments. The whole thing was openly designed to promote the film and sell tickets. DeMille even sent Judge Rugemer a personal piece of granite he had carved from the real Mount Sinai to use as a sample. Decades later, one of these monuments on the grounds of the Texas state capitol in Austin became the subject of the 2005 Supreme Court case Van Orden versus Perry. The court ruled 5-4 that the monument could stay on government property. What makes this almost too strange to believe is that the inscription carved into the Texas granite slab is a direct copy of the text on the movie's prop tablets. Not the biblical text. The movie version. A promotional stunt for a 1956 Hollywood film became the basis of a landmark First Amendment ruling that still shapes American law today. Number 17. ABC skipped the Easter broadcast, once in 1999, and the backlash was devastating. The Ten Commandments has aired on ABC nearly every single Easter for over 50 consecutive years. The tradition began with the network's first broadcast on February 18, 1973, when 24 million Americans tuned in on a single night. The film became woven into Easter weekend the same way turkey became woven into Thanksgiving. Then in 1999, ABC executives pulled the film from the Easter schedule and replaced it with Disney programming, reasoning that family content would perform better in that time slot. What followed was described by television historians as an unprecedented wave of viewer complaints and protest letters flooding the network's offices. Families who had watched the film every single Easter for decades were furious. ABC reversed course the very next year and reinstated the broadcast. The film has not been pulled from the Easter schedule since. Actress Ann Baxter, who played Nefertiti, once gave audiences her personal advice for watching the film at home. She said, "I advise sitting down with a big box of chocolates, a jug of white wine, and a loaf of freshly baked bread. I do it that way, and I still love this last gasp of Hollywood excessiveness." Number 16. DeMille buried an entire fake Egyptian city in California, and it became a real archaeological dig. Before the 1956 version, DeMille made a silent film version of the same story in 1923. For that film, he built the largest movie set in history in the Guadalupe-Nipomo Dunes on California's Central Coast. The set was a replica Egyptian city, 12 stories high and 720 feet wide, featuring 4 35-foot statues of Ramesses and 21 5-ton sphinxes. When filming wrapped, rather than let rival filmmakers reuse it, DeMille ordered the entire city dynamited and bulldozed into the sand dunes. He later joked, "If 1,000 years from now archaeologists happen to dig beneath the sands of Guadalupe, I hope they will not rush into print with the amazing news that Egyptian civilization extended all the way to the Pacific coast." They did not wait 1,000 years. In 1983, filmmaker Peter Brosnan found the site after a storm uncovered a chunk of plaster statuary sticking out of the dunes. Excavations unearthed Prohibition-era cough syrup bottles, makeup tins, and a piece of burned toast from the original film crew's catering operation. In 2017, archaeologists dug up a 300-pound sphinx with original paint still intact, after more than 90 years underground. The plaster had deteriorated to what one archaeologist described as a blue cheese consistency. DeMille's buried movie set is now a wildlife sanctuary for the endangered western snowy plover, which means further excavation is legally restricted. Number 15. The parting of the Red Sea required demolishing a studio wall and 360,000 gallons of water. The most famous scene in the film took 6 months to create and cost approximately $1 million on its own. Special effects wizard John P. Fulton built a colossal U-shaped water tank on the Paramount backlot, so enormous that the physical fence separating the Paramount and RKO studio lots had to be completely torn down just to make room for it. 360,000 gallons of water were loaded into the tank and released through 15 hydraulically operated valves. For the towering walls of water, the crew built an 80-foot-long concrete ramp and filmed water sheeting violently down it, then physically flipped that footage upside down so the water appeared to surge upward into the sky. The final composite stitched together approximately 30 separate elements, including water tank footage, inverted ramp footage, Egyptian location shots, miniatures, matte paintings, and blue screen footage of the actors, all aligned frame by frame on an optical printer. The result was so convincing that even decades after computer-generated imagery became the standard, film historians continued to rank the Red Sea sequence among the greatest special effects shots ever put on screen. And this was all accomplished without a single computer. Number 14. Hailstones were spray-painted. Popcorn and the Frog Plague was cut because it was too funny. For the plague of fiery hail raining down on Egypt, the props department needed something that would bounce convincingly across the set without injuring the actors working beneath it. Their solution was both brilliantly practical and completely absurd. They used ordinary popcorn, the same kind you buy at a movie theater, and spray-painted it white. It bounced like real hailstones on camera. It was harmless to the cast, and it was so cheap to produce that they could bury the entire set in it without worrying about the budget. But here is the scene that never made it into the film at all. DeMille actually shot a sequence depicting the plague of frogs, with hundreds of frogs hopping frantically across the set, while Egyptian women screamed and fled. He watched the footage in the editing room and immediately ordered it cut. His reasoning was brutally honest. He decided that women running away from small frogs would probably bring more laughs from the audience than genuine horror. And he was almost certainly right. So the next time you watch the plague's sequence and notice the plague of frogs is conspicuously absent from the film, now you know. DeMille filmed it, hated it, buried it. The plague of frogs was killed by the director's own sense of humor. Number 13. Charlton Heston's baby son got the role of infant Moses before he was even born. When Charlton Heston mentioned to DeMille's team that his wife Lydia was expecting a baby, associate producer Henry Wilcoxon immediately said, "If it is a boy, who better to play the baby Moses?" DeMille agreed on the spot. When Fraser Clark Heston was born on February the 12th, 1955, the very first telegram his mother received in the hospital was not from family. It was from Cecil B. DeMille himself, reading, "Congratulations, he has got the part. Love, CB." Fraser was approximately 3 months old during filming, roughly the age Moses was when his mother placed him in the basket on the Nile. In the scenes where you watch Jochebed tenderly setting the baby afloat on the water, you are watching Heston's real wife holding his real son. The emotional authenticity you feel is not acting. It is a genuine family moment captured on film. Fraser Clark. Heston grew up to become a filmmaker and screenwriter, directing his own father in Treasure Island in 1990. His Hollywood career began at 3 months old, and he never quite topped that opening role. Number 12. Yul Brynner started lifting weights obsessively because he was terrified of standing shirtless next to Heston. Yul Brynner was one of the most commanding screen presences of his generation. He had a shaved head, a piercing gaze, and a natural physical authority that made audiences nervous just looking at him. But when he learned that he would spend most of the Ten Commandments bare-chested on screen, standing directly beside the 6'3", broad-shouldered, physically imposing Charlton Heston, he panicked. Brenner launched into an intense weightlifting program specifically designed to bulk up his frame and make sure he would not look physically outmatched in their scenes together. Film historians believe this explains why Brenner's physique appears noticeably more muscular in The King and I, which he filmed immediately after the Ten Commandments. He had effectively built a new body for one role and carried it straight into another. On set, a Scully box, which is a hidden raised platform, was used regularly during scenes where Brenner and Heston stood together, to reduce the height difference between the 5'8" Brenner and the towering Heston. The rivalry between the two men, whether it was genuine competition or playful performance, created exactly the kind of electric tension that made their scenes crackle with energy. And in one of the most generous assessments one actor has ever given another, Heston later said that despite the competition, Brenner gave the single best performance in the entire film. Number 11. Audrey Hepburn was DeMille's first choice for the female lead and was rejected for being too slim. By February of 1954, DeMille's office was reportedly full of photographs of Audrey Hepburn, who was his first and most passionate choice to play the fiery Egyptian queen Nefertiti. She was ultimately passed over for a reason that feels almost comically superficial in hindsight. DeMille decided she was too slender to fill out the form-fitting Egyptian costumes the wardrobe department had designed. Other names on the shortlist included Vivian Leigh and Jane Russell. Anne Baxter won the role after DeMille watched her film Carnival Story alone at home 3 times in a row. When she finally met him in person, Baxter suggested wearing a prosthetic Egyptian nose to better fit the look of the character. DeMille reportedly pounded the table with his fist and declared, "No, Baxter, your Irish nose stays in this picture." Her performance became one of the most gloriously theatrical turns in Hollywood epic history, and not a single nose prosthetic was required. Number 10. DeMille personally rescued Edward G. Robinson's career from the Hollywood blacklist. During the McCarthy era, Hollywood was a place where careers could be destroyed by association or accusation. Edward G. Robinson, who played the villain Dathan in the Ten Commandments, had been called before the House Un-American Activities Committee 3 separate times. He never cooperated, but his name had appeared on lists of charities that investigators labeled Communist Front organizations, and studios quietly stopped hiring him. When Robinson's name came up as a potential candidate for Dathan, someone warned DeMille that hiring him could be politically problematic. DeMille, one of the most arch-conservative figures in Hollywood, reviewed the situation and hired Robinson without hesitation. Robinson later wrote about the experience with visible emotion. "Cecil B. DeMille returned me to films. Cecil B. DeMille restored my self-respect." He added, "No more conservative or patriarchal figure existed in Hollywood, and no fairer one." The man Robinson played in the film, Dathan the Traitor and Oppressor, could not have been more different from the man who cast him. Number 9. The opening monologue was a direct Cold War political message disguised as a Bible story. When the Ten Commandments begins, before a single scene has played, Cecil B. DeMille himself appears on screen, stepping out from behind a stage curtain and speaks directly to the audience. He frames the entire film as an answer to one specific political question. Are men the property of the state, or are they free souls under God? This same battle continues throughout the world today. That phrase was not a spiritual observation. It was a pointed statement aimed directly at Soviet communism. DeMille cast mostly American actors as the Israelites representing the free world, and mostly European actors as the Egyptians representing totalitarian power. Yul Brynner, born in Vladivostok, Russia, adopted a subtly Russian-inflected accent for Pharaoh Ramesses. DeMille told journalists that showing this film in the Soviet Union would be dangerous to the established authorities. The staggering part is that most people who have watched the Ten Commandments on television have never seen this opening monologue at all. Nearly every ABC broadcast has omitted it entirely. Millions of viewers have spent decades watching a Cold War political manifesto without ever knowing the prologue existed. Number 8. Charlton Heston voiced God, and the reason comes from ancient rabbinical tradition. For the burning bush sequence, DeMille faced a challenge with no obvious solution. How do you present the voice of God in a way that feels authentic rather than simply theatrical? He turned to the Midrash Rabbah, an ancient collection of rabbinical commentary on the Torah. According to the Midrash Rabbah, God deliberately chose to speak to Moses in the voice of his deceased father Amram, so that Moses would not be frightened by an entirely alien presence. Since Amram does not appear in the film, DeMille applied this logic by having Heston voice the deity himself. Moses is literally speaking to himself, hearing his own voice coming from the burning bush, creating an uncanny psychological depth that most viewers feel without ever understanding why. For the later commandment scene, the voice of God became a layered composite of multiple voices, including Heston's, DeMille's own voice, singer Jesse DeLos Jukes, and DeMille's publicist Donald Hain. The composite was then passed through the Vox Humana stop of the Salt Lake Tabernacle organ, a permission granted personally by the President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The result is one of the most recognizable sounds in cinema history, built from the voices of 4 men and a 200-year-old pipe organ. Number 7. DeMille's research team studied over 950 books and published the results as an academic text. Before a single camera rolled, DeMille assigned his head of research, Henry Nordlinger, to conduct what may be the most exhaustive research project in the history of Hollywood. Nordlinger and his associates spent years consulting over 1,000 libraries worldwide, studying 950 books, 984 periodicals, and nearly 3,000 photographs. The screenplay drew from ancient sources, including the writings of Philo and Josephus, the Midrash Rabbah, the Mishnah, the Book of Jasher, and the Quran. Nordlinger compiled all of this into a published academic book released by the University of Southern California Press in 1956. However, all of this scholarship came with one magnificent asterisk. DeMille was not a slave to historical accuracy when accuracy conflicted with drama. Nordlinger himself dryly noted that DeMille used research when it would further his purpose. Camels did not exist in Egypt during the period when Moses likely lived. DeMille used them anyway because they looked spectacular. The balance between meticulous scholarship and shameless spectacle was always tipped in favor of whatever would make the best scene. Number 6. DeMille's mother was secretly Jewish, and he never publicly acknowledged it. Cecil B. DeMille spent his entire career making films steeped in biblical narrative and Old Testament drama. He was raised as a devout Episcopalian and spoke publicly and often about his Christian faith. He never once mentioned in his autobiography or in any public statement that his mother, Beatrice Samuel, was born into a Sephardic Jewish family from Liverpool, England. Beatrice converted to Christianity before marrying Henry DeMille, and her Jewish heritage was a private family matter DeMille apparently chose to keep entirely out of the public conversation. The implications are extraordinary. The man who spent 30 years obsessively returning to the Moses story, who poured the final years of his life into the most famous retelling of the Exodus ever committed to film, was himself half Jewish by birth. DeMille received the Torah Award from the National Women's League of the United Synagogues of America for his heroic conception of the story. Whether his personal heritage shaped his lifelong attachment to this particular narrative is something only he could have answered. He never offered that answer publicly. But the question sits there, quietly, just below the surface of every frame. Number 5. The orgy scene took 3 weeks to film and produced Hollywood's most legendary complaint. The Golden Calf sequence, in which the Israelites abandon their faith and descend into wild excess, took DeMille over 3 weeks to film. Hundreds of extras were brought in day after day, take after take, to simulate acts of debauchery that DeMille needed to walk right up to the edge of the production code without technically crossing it. After more than 3 weeks of relentless retakes, one famously exhausted female extra delivered what has since become one of the most quoted lines in Hollywood behind-the-scenes history. Charlton Heston recorded the remark in his autobiography, though even his account kept it deliberately vague. What she reportedly said, with considerable feeling, was a colorful expression of her desire to exit the production by any means necessary. The scene still managed to sneak through content that critics immediately noticed. One film reviewer tagged the entire film with the nickname Sexodus. The New Republic magazine, reviewing the 220-minute runtime, offered what remains the most elegant summary of watching the 10 Commandments. Longer than the 40 years in the desert. Number 4. The composer was himself blacklisted, and DeMille gave him the biggest break of his career. The 10 Commandments was supposed to have its full score written by Victor Young, who had collaborated with DeMille many times before. But Young was in serious health decline and declined the assignment, passing away in November of 1956, the same month the film premiered. DeMille turned to a relatively unknown composer named Elmer Bernstein, originally hired only to write incidental music for on-screen dances. The irony is almost too perfect. DeMille, the most arch-conservative figure in Hollywood, promoted Bernstein to write the entire 2.5-hour score. What DeMille did not publicly acknowledge is that Bernstein had himself been flagged as a suspected communist sympathizer during the Red Scare. Bernstein composed using exotic instruments, including the shofar, the tipel, and the theremin. Astonishingly, the score received no Academy Award nomination whatsoever. It remains one of the most celebrated oversights in Oscar history. In 2016, Intrada Records released the complete score as a landmark 6-disc box set running 357 minutes. Number 3. DeMille had a heart attack at the top of a 12-story set and returned to work within 2 days. On November 7, 1954, the 73-year-old Cecil B. DeMille climbed 130 feet up the side of the massive Per Ramesses Gate set near Cairo because a camera was misbehaving and he wanted to check it personally. He suffered a severe heart attack at the top of that structure. Egyptian doctors told him he needed to rest for an indefinite period, possibly weeks. DeMille came back to the director's chair within 2 to 3 days. He kept the entire incident private, telling no one outside his immediate medical team. He went on to suffer what biographers believe was a second heart attack during the remainder of the production. He lost 21 pounds during the Egypt shoot alone. He never fully recovered his health. After the film premiered in New York to a standing ovation, DeMille lived for just over 2 more years, suffering a cascade of further heart attacks beginning in June of 1958 and dying on January the 21st, 1959. The film he had given his final heartbeats to create was already being called a masterpiece and earning the modern equivalent of over $1 billion at the box office. Number 2. DeMille was competing with his own 33-year-old version of the same story. The Ten Commandments was not Cecil B. DeMille's first attempt at telling the Moses story. It was his second. In 1923, he made a silent film version of the exact same story, structured completely differently. The biblical Exodus only occupied the first act. The rest was a modern-day moral fable about two brothers set in contemporary America. For that production, DeMille built his full replica Egyptian city in the California sand dunes, then buried it when filming ended. In 1956, he rebuilt it from memory, from research, and from a fierce competitive need to surpass what his younger self had made. He was not just making a new film, he was settling a 33-year-old score with himself. Every extra dollar spent, every historical detail sourced from 1,000 libraries, every frame of the Red Sea footage was in some sense DeMille saying to his 1923 self, "Watch this." The buried city he had left in the California dunes was the ghost haunting him through every frame. He did not just tell the story of Moses returning to Egypt. He returned to Egypt himself, and this time, he refused to leave anything behind. Number 1. The film that almost never finished has now been watched by more people. Cecil B. DeMille spent 2 years making a film that studios thought would bankrupt Paramount. He suffered heart attacks on set and came back. He commanded 25,000 extras and 15,000 animals in temperatures that would have broken most people decades younger than him. He built entire cities in 2 countries and buried one of them. The film opened to a standing ovation in New York in October of 1956 and grossed $65 million in its original release, translating to over $700 million today. It was nominated for 7 Academy Awards and won only 1 for Best Visual Effects. Charlton Heston received no acting nomination. The composer received no nomination. The film lost Best Picture to Around the World in 80 Days, which film historians regularly cite as one of the weakest Best Picture winners in Oscar history. None of that mattered. The film moved to television and became a tradition so deeply embedded in American Easter that when ABC tried to skip it in 1999, the public revolt forced the network to bring it back permanently. By most estimates, it has been seen by more people on television than any other single film in history. DeMille gave his last major public speech at Brigham Young University in 1957. He said, "The voice that speaks to you tonight will long be stilled before you reach my age. But the thoughts that I have tried to give you will live on, because they are eternal." He was talking about the commandments, but he could just as easily have been talking about the film. 70 years later, both are still standing. So now that you know all of this, the question is simple. Which of these 20 facts hit you the hardest and completely changed the way you will watch this film the next time Easter rolls around? Drop your answer in the comments below, because we genuinely want to know.